All right, so you've learned the doctrine of provocation in your lectures. Now, let's see how it actually works when a court gets its hands on a tragic, real-world case. We're going to do a deep dive into Girouard versus State.
And this is the central question, isn't it? It's the whole ballgame. Can what someone says to you, no matter how awful, be enough to legally excuse a violent, fatal reaction? That's what the court had to decide, and you're about to see exactly how they did it.
Okay, here's our roadmap. We're going to follow the classic Farrak structure. We'll start with the facts, nail down the legal issue, lay out the rule, walk through the court's analysis, get to the final holding, and wrap it all up with the one thing you absolutely need to take away from this case.
Now, before we can even get to the legal stuff, we have to understand the human story. To really get why the court ruled the way it did, you have to know what happened on that terrible night.
What's just shocking here is how fast everything went down. We're talking 20 minutes from a tense phone call to an absolute tragedy. An argument starts, it moves to the bedroom, and that's when Joyce begins this just relentless verbal assault. And this is where the facts become legally critical.
The taunts were designed to be as painful as possible. Joyce starts with these deeply personal attacks. We know from the case that her relationship with her own father was terrible, so comparing Stephen to him was just a brutal, calculated blow. Then, she pivots. She goes from attacking him as a person to attacking his entire career. You have to remember, Stephen was in the Army. A court-martial isn't just a slap on the wrist, it's a potential end to everything he's worked for. And here's the kicker. It was a lie. She hadn't filed any charges at all.
And the verbal barrage ends with this, the final rejection. She basically confirms every fear he might have had about their marriage. It's right after this final statement that he goes to the kitchen, gets a knife, comes back, and kills her. Those are the grim facts the court had to work with.
Okay, so those are the heartbreaking facts. Now let's switch gears and put on our lawyer hats. The court's job isn't to make a moral judgment. It's to answer a very, very specific legal question that comes out of these facts.
And there it is. That's the core legal issue. The defense was arguing that what Joyce said was so extreme, so beyond the pale, that it was legally adequate provocation. And if they could prove that, it would knock the charge down from murder to manslaughter. Everything, the whole case, hangs on that one little phrase, legally adequate.
So, what's the test here? How does a court decide if something is legally adequate? Well, they don't just make it up. They apply a very old, very established legal rule.
And this is absolutely crucial. Notice the standard here. It's the reasonable person. The law is not asking if Stephen Girouard, with his specific personality and his specific history, lost control. No, the question is, would an ordinary, reasonable person in that exact situation have become so enraged that they'd act out of pure passion and not thinking? That's a huge difference.
So for the provocation defense to even have a chance, you've got to check all four of these boxes. Not one, not two, all four. It has to be something that would set off a reasonable person. It has to actually make the defendant lose control. It has to happen right away with no time to cool off, and the defendant has to still be in that heat of passion.
Okay, this is the most important part. This is where the rubber meets the road. How did the court take that four-part rule and apply it to the awful facts we just went over? Let's walk through it.
So what's interesting is the court doesn't just brush off what Joyce said. They start by saying, yeah, these words were horrible, they were inflammatory, but, and this is a huge but, they immediately pivot to this classic common law rule that says words alone are not enough. And why is that the rule? It's a policy choice. The law says we expect people to have more self-control than that. You can't let insults be a legal excuse for killing. So they apply that rule directly and find that no matter how nasty the taunts got, they just don't meet the legal standard.
Think of it like this. The law has these two buckets. In one bucket, you have things that might be adequate provocation, like finding your spouse in the act of adultery or getting into a serious fight. But then you have the other bucket, and things like a minor push or lies and threats about the future, and especially words alone, get thrown squarely in that inadequate bucket every single time.
All right, so the court has the facts, they have the rule, they've done the analysis, so what's the bottom line?
No surprise here. The conviction is affirmed. The murder charge stands. Stephen Girouard's provocation defense completely failed because, under the law, Joyce's words were not legally adequate to reduce the crime to manslaughter.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second. Beyond this one tragic story, what's the big lesson here? Why do law students still study this case today?
If you remember one thing from this case, make it this. The law draws a very, very bright line in the sand. Girouard powerfully reaffirms this classic rule. It says that the reasonable person is expected to withstand even the most vicious, cutting verbal attacks without resorting to lethal violence. The bar is set high, and words alone just don't clear it.
And that sets you up for the next step, right? You've got the rule from Girouard down cold. So what happens if we tweak the facts a little? What if there's a minor shove right before the verbal tirade starts? Does that little bit of physical contact change everything? Does it open the door for the provocation defense? That's how you use a case like this to really master the doctrine. Thanks for watching.